Julian Fleming finally commits to Penn State, and I imagine that he's going to enroll and, unlike Dante Cephas, is going to be a part of winter workouts, the spring practices, so that he can actually get adjusted and there isn't that delay in terms of everything. Playbook, chemistry, the system. Ohio State does things differently. Penn State does things differently. Ohio State does winning a little differently than Penn State at this point in time. However, you want this to change, and that's why you bring in the player Julian Fleming that you are targeting, and you finally get him back. The prodigal wide receiver returns home. All kidding aside, Fleming was a must get for Penn State. Aside from the prior relationship, he's from the state of Pennsylvania, all of that. Fleming, for me, when I'm looking at this, checks a lot of boxes outside of just, well, he's a wide receiver and he's an upgraded talent. It's more than just that. Allow me to explain. So Fleming, unlike a Mitchell Tinsley, a Dante Cephas, and even a Malik McClain in this case. So Malik McClain coming over from Florida State, ACC. That's good. If you're going to get these players to come in and expect them to start right away, I don't particularly like the Group 5 to Power 4 adjustment. That almost feels like that's a 2-year project. And as we've seen, Cephas bolted. He didn't want to be a part of that 2-year plan. And that's what it originally was. It wasn't a 1 year and go to the NFL. He had another year of eligibility, as we can see from re-entering the portal. So that's my point. Cephas wasn't going to come in and be a home run superstar in 1 year. You were going to have to see progress, and we never did. With Julian Fleming, he's coming from Power 4, right? It's not Power 5 anymore. Power 4, Big Ten, winning football. Ohio State right now is better than Penn State. I don't like admitting it, but that's the fact of the matter. But my point is here that Fleming now has the ability, or he already has with him, the work ethic. He understands what it takes to be competitive in the Big Ten. He understands how much time you have to spend in the film room, what it takes to go up against, because he's done that for the past how many years now? 3-4 years. Even though he didn't make a serious impact at Ohio State, given that he was a 5-star and rated as one of the best high school football recruits at wide receiver in the country once upon a time back in 2020, he still was around a winning culture. It's not like Penn State is picking up a wide receiver from a losing program or a program that's coming off of bad seasons consecutively. Fleming was in an ultra competitive wide receiver room on an ultra competitive team. So that means he's going to be able to carry over those characteristics to Penn State. You don't have to teach them, and he doesn't have to relearn them. He's already coming with that. So, because the biggest thing that we've talked about when it comes to this Penn State wide receiver room from 2023 was the fact that they weren't working hard enough. They didn't have the work ethic and the mentality to keep going and keep pushing and go above and beyond. They only did what was necessary to get by. That's the rumor. That's the rumor. I just want to preface that. And Julian Fleming now checks that box. And Fleming, being a veteran, playing Big Ten football for multiple years, even though he wasn't the superstar of that Ohio State wide receiver room, he instantly becomes a team leader at Penn State. Would I make him a captain? No, I would not make him a captain because it's a one and done situation here for Penn State. But he should definitely be the face of the wide receiver room and be the main voice, even though he's not a team captain overall. He's certainly almost a pseudo captain in this case of the wide receivers because of his background. So let's address that. He's never had that real impact. He never had a serious impact at Ohio State. It was always a role player, role receiver. This is true. You're right to say that Julian Fleming never lived up to expectations at Ohio State. But Ohio State always had better talent. And that's saying something because Fleming was a 5-star wide receiver, 6'4", right? All the athleticism in the world. But when you have Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Mecca Ibuka, and Marvin Harrison Jr. is probably going to be one of the first 3 players selected in 2024. I mean, that's stiff competition. Yes, if Julian Fleming's so great, why didn't he beat all that competition out? But that's my point. he was working alongside of all of those wide receivers. So he's had to get better in some sort of way, even though the opportunities weren't there. The opportunities were all taken away. And it's not like these wide receivers were fourth, fifth round, sixth round picks. All of them have been first rounders, and Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be the best of them. Emeka Ibuka is coming back, but he's also going to be a first round pick at some point, no later than round two. That's the way I see it. So that's the idea. Is Fleming capable of being a number one wide receiver because he's never been since his time at high school at Southern Columbia? He could be. He can be a number one wide receiver. Can I sit here today, right now, January 3rd, live in 2024 and say that, yeah, Julian Fleming is going to be the number one wide receiver and will be a nightmare matchup for Big Ten defenses, and we'll see how far Penn State gets. But the competition that Penn State's going to face in 2024. He can be, he could not be, but I'd lean closer to that he's going to be a respectable wide receiver because the issue was that Penn State wide receivers never got the respect. Keandre Lambert-Smith, whoever, Dante Cephas, at the end of the day, we're all struggling to get open. And opposing defenses for about a half of the first quarter, maybe the first quarter, would play back off coverage and see what is Penn State going to do? Then they test them, and the wide receivers would fail every single time. Julian Fleming now changes that. So even though he hasn't had the responsibility of being the focal point, the number one target, he can handle the responsibilities because of who he was playing alongside of all those years, being a veteran, being a smart football player, and he has the talent. So maybe he hasn't lived up to that 5-star rating that he received, the consensus rating a few years back, but he's not some no-name 2-star either. And he's coming from a Power 4 Big Ten school and a successful one at that in Ohio State. And this is another reason that I don't think so. Everyone's concerned about the passing game, and I get that because Drew Aller's window is closing. You want to maximize what you have now, and Julian Fleming helps that. But forget about the passing game for a second, folks. Let's talk about the run game. Julian Fleming is arguably the best run blocker of the skilled positions in the transfer portal, and he's committed to Penn State. I'll give a shout out to Tyler Donahue over at 24/7 Sports because he pointed this out. He said that according to Pro Football Focus, and I know people have criticisms of PFF, I'm not here to debate that, but they had him rated, Julian Fleming rated, as the number 2 blocker on the entire team. That's saying something to score relative to your position, right? So yes, the center, the guard are going to be better than Julian Fleming at run blocking. But in terms of the respective position and how successful they were, Julian Fleming was the guy, second best based on that score. And I think this was kind of forgotten about, swept under the rug. Remember at the beginning of the season, we talked about, Nicholas Singleton's not getting the home run. He's not the home run hitter anymore. He's getting 10 yards here and there, but he's not breaking off the 50, 60-yard touchdowns. Katron Allen limited in the explosive plays and trying to figure out why that was. Blocking from the wide receivers or lack thereof, the inability to do just that. So when I talked about Julian Fleming checks other boxes here, this is another one. You now get a boost in your run blocking. And Andy Kotelnicki in this offense, it's a multiple system, but it's still going to focus on getting the football into the hands of Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen, whoever that third running back is, whatever. It's still going to be that dynamic duo and then some. Because you have Quentin Martin, you have Corey Smith coming in, and those guys are insanely talented. My point being, you still have this dynamic duo, this two-headed monster at running back. The offense is going to start with them. And, you have the 5-star quarterback to go along with it. But Andy Kotelnicki is an offensive line guy. He's a tight ends guy. That's his background. So he's going to err on the side of running the rock and establishing the ground game first, and Julian Fleming helps with that. So the wide receivers weren't able to block and help open up those explosive plays a season ago. Julian Fleming definitely helps with that. I don't think we talked about it enough. It kind of just went away. Even though Singleton and Allen got better down the stretch of the season, there still wasn't, Singleton didn't have that long explosive touchdown run. That said, he got close. He broke off some big plays, but it wasn't as consistent as it was before. So this was a move that Penn State needed to make. This wasn't a want. This was a need. And I'll admit it doesn't fix everything, but All of the issues that I brought up, work ethic, focus, playbook, run blocking, veteran experience, leadership, all of it. Julian Fleming brings a lot of that. So it's more than just getting a talented wide receiver. He's doing more than just that because there's still more work to be done. I'll look back and say, was Julian Fleming maybe a little overrated coming out of high school? I can agree with that. Being one of the top wide receivers in the country and being a bona fide 5-star, consensus 5-star, that's lofty expectations to live up to. And then you look at the school that he went to, Southern Columbia is, I mean, they're a powerhouse when it comes to Pennsylvania football. They're also double A, and they typically run the football a lot. So having a 6'4" wide receiver like Julian Fleming is certainly going to be a matchup nightmare, a mismatch every single day when you go up at the high school level. Then he goes to Ohio State and he's overshadowed by some of those other 5-stars that come in. And that can be true. Both of these things can be true. Julian Fleming can be overrated out of high school, but he can still be talented. Marvin Harrison Jr. is allowed to be better and accelerate his football career faster than Julian Fleming. Everyone's allowed to have different paths. For Penn State, they get an upgraded wide receiver, and Julian Fleming benefits from actually having the capability of being a number one type of wide receiver in this offense. And he has a talented quarterback to do it. Drew Aller's got to fix some things, but he has a talented quarterback to still do it.